Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. The Lakers fell 123-87 to drop to 50-29, their third straight loss. They are now a full game back of Denver for the number 3 seed. Denver is likely going to go at least 1-2 over their final 3 games, if not 2-1, meaning that the Lakers would have to go 2-1 or 3-0 to catch them. So it seems likely now that with LA losing tonight to OKC, they will most likely be in the 4-5 matchup with Houston. It's just a matter of which team is going to finish 4, which team is going to finish 5. And the winner of that series, however long it goes, the prize is you get Oklahoma City in round 2 and almost certainly a 4 or 5 game series. And of note, Houston just beat Phoenix, so they are tied with the Lakers, but the Lakers have the tiebreaker, so they remain at number 4. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. I got a notification from StreamYard that there's been some YouTube connection issues going into tonight. So hopefully the stream isn't too bad right now. I apologize for that, but apparently it's out of my control. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. Let's get into it. To be completely honest, I don't really want to talk a lot about this game. There's actually some things to talk about from this game in terms of the South Bay standouts and JJ Redick and Jared Vanderbilt getting into it, what this means for the seeding and standings and whatnot. So Buha's big picture off of tonight's game is finding the right 9. And what I mean by that is this was a big topic for JJ Redick tonight before and after the game. He admitted that seeding has gone out the window for the Lakers. They are no longer concerned with seeding, and their focus here is getting the group in the right space, figuring out how they want to play, establishing a certain rhythm going into the playoffs, and also figuring out the 9 players that they want to use in their playoff rotation. I would say right now there are 7 locks or near locks. LeBron, Marcus, Rui, Luke, DeAndre, Jackson, and Jake. I think all 7 of those guys are going to be in that 9-man rotation. Right now, from a starting lineup perspective, I think the most likely starting group would be DA, LeBron, Jake, Marcus, and Luke. I think Luke has played his way into the starting group with his ball handling and passing and pull-up shooting, in addition to the off-ball shooting that he already provides and the gravity that he provides. Marcus, LeBron, and DA are going to continue to start. And then between Rui and Jake, I think that is a real competition. And Rui has outplayed him offensively the last couple games by a wide margin, but Jake has also outplayed Rui defensively, I would say, by a decent to wide margin. So I think JJ is going to lean more into Jake and the defensive side of things, but perhaps he goes with Rui. As I've talked about before, the lineup data with LeBron, Rui, and DA has been problematic all season. I think that really limits the Lakers' defensive floor on that end. And I don't think, even with them leaning more offensive, let's say, with that trio, I don't think there's like good enough offensively to make up for it, right? So I think the best balance, in my opinion, would be Jake. But either way, I think if Rui's coming off the bench, he's still going to play a big role. He's still going to be the primary bench scorer. If he's starting, that also kind of marginalizes him, as we discussed earlier in the season. But either way, those are the 7 of the 9. That leaves 2 spots for Jared Vanderbilt, Maxi Kleber, Bronny James, Kobe Buffkin, Adu Thero, and Dalton Connect. Drew Timme and Nick Smith Jr., as well as Chris Magnon, aren't playoff eligible because they are two-way guys unless they are converted by the end of the season, which I would say Drew Timme made a pretty strong case to potentially be converted. I would make the case for Drew Timme and Adu Thero coming off of this game. I think both guys bring things that no one else in this group of competition can provide. But I think based on pedigree and hierarchy, and also one of those guys being a two-way guy technically, I think the two most likely guys right now to grab spots 8 and 9 are Jared Vanderbilt and Bronny James. Now, maybe this Vando JJ situation got out of hand to the extent that it wasn't just a one-game benching from JJ. After, I'm going to touch on it more in my takeaways, but they got into it early in the second quarter. JJ pulled Vando. They got into it a couple times during the timeout, and Vando got benched the rest of the game, only played 5 minutes, and JJ talked about it after the game. So Vando left the arena without talking to reporters. Maybe this escalates to a place where it's irreparable, but I don't think it's there yet. Again, this is fresh off of the game being over, a little over an hour ago. But as things stand, I think, especially with the Lakers needing a certain level of defense and energy, and Vando being a multi-year veteran, he has the inside track here to earning one of those 9 rotation spots. But this to me is the biggest thing to monitor over the final 3 games. Again, we know LeBron, we'll see if he ends up playing in the back-to-back. Marcus is still day-to-day. JJ made it sound like he'll be back at some point this week, but it's unclear when. I would be stunned if he played in the back-to-back, right? So at best, he'll play in one end of the back-to-back and then maybe the Utah game, but that's the most optimistic scenario here. I'd be pretty surprised if he plays in the Golden State game. It would kind of make more sense to play in the second night against Phoenix. And unless LA just punts that game and really tries for the Golden State game, we'll see how they handle it. But this is the biggest thing for me is how this group is playing and who's playing. And that will go a long way in determining whether they have any shot in round 1 against Houston. Now, on to notable performers here. So let's start with Rui. And this brings us to some of the JJ drama of the night. I was going to touch on this in my takeaway, but I'll just hit on it right now. So first timeout of the game happens at the 9:20 mark. And I went back and rewatched it. I still wasn't quite sure what Rui was supposed to be doing that JJ pulled him for. The only thing I could come up with was on that preceding possession, OKC missed a shot. There was sort of a loose ball in the paint, and 4 of the 5 Lakers were in the paint, in the fray, battling for the rebound. Rui's out near the 3-point line, and he's just watching. And he turned, he didn't box out, he didn't try to get into the mix, and maybe that couple seconds of hesitation and inaction was what pissed JJ off and caused him to call the timeout and curse out Rui. So JJ gets really upset with Rui, I believe, on that possession, calls the timeout, cusses him out, and pulls him and benches him for, I think, 5 or 6 minutes until he comes back in later in the first quarter. So that set the tone for how JJ was going to be coaching tonight, how he was feeling. Lakers are down 8-2 at that point. All right, this is not working the way I intended to, but I'll still read through the box score here. So Rui finishes with 15 points, 5 rebounds, had a block. Now, I thought played much better after the benching. He had a nice and one dunk off of a lob in transition over Chet. I believe it was Luke who hit him with that. Had a nice couple of drives and post moves against Kason Wallace. Had another deep seal where he got a dunk. Did have a couple of times where they poked the ball loose from him, and I think he's got to be better with his hands and just ball security. But overall, I thought Rui played much better the rest of the way, and it was nice to see. And he's now put together a couple of nice games where offensively he's been efficient. Back-to-back games with 15-plus points, back-to-back games with 5-plus rebounds. I still think from an energy perspective and a defensive perspective, he can be better and be a bit more locked in. But I also think, looking at, Rui is a guy who I think can be influenced by the group to some degree. He even had the quote recently where he said he's not a leader. And I think that's reflected where Rui's not the guy that's going to go set the tone and get the group going. The only time off the top of my head I can remember him doing that was in Game 5 against Minnesota, where, remember, he had the big dunk on Gobert, and that kind of got the crowd into it and gave the team some life momentarily. But outside of that, Rui's more of, I'm going to go off of the vibe of the group, and the vibe of the group tonight was like spirited for the first quarter and a half, but eventually the talent disparity took over and OKC ran them off the floor. Then Drew Timme, I really liked what we saw from Drew tonight. Big first quarter with 10 points, finished the game with 11 points, so was not quite the same player. And I thought they did a better job of shading over aggressively towards him, sending some doubles and forcing the ball out of his hands at times. But 11 points, 4 for 9 shooting, hit a couple threes, just so skilled as a short roll finisher with his little floaters. And they also were running the offense through him a lot. JJ talked about that after the game, where they put it in their walkthrough. They wanted Drew Timme to bring the ball up the floor and be a pseudo. I mean, he played some 4 and some 5, so you could say point center, but somewhere between a point forward and a point center, point big man, whatever. But he was running a lot of DHOs, and I like some of the actions they ran with him. So Drew Timme, I thought, made a strong case. Like, to me, he was the best of the young players tonight overall. And he has, I mean, he's had some opportunities that I think he's capitalized on. He had that stretch going back to late January where he was in the rotation, and partly because of the two-way situation, but partly for unknown reasons, JJ just pulled him out of the rotation, and they had found those big bench groups with Drew Timme at the 4 playing some zone had been working, and then they just went away from it. And I think he has a strong case to be on the team. Like, I think if it were up to me right now, I would waive Kobe Buffkin and convert Drew Timme and make him the 15th and final player, assuming the Lakers aren't going to scour and canvas the market and try to find the best free agent. I think a simple in-house solution would be converting Drew Timme into the 15th man and giving him a real shot to play in the playoffs. Luke Kennard, once again, doing his best point Luke impersonation, 10 points, 9 assists, 4 for 7 shooting. Would like to see a little bit more aggression from him offensively, but hit several pull-up jumpers. I liked his flow. I mean, I think one thing with Luke that has really stood out, and this is a testament to the load that Luka, first and foremost, but also Austin and LeBron have had to carry offensively with this group. And you just see with Luke bringing the ball up as much as he has been, like, because you rarely get to see a guy shift this dramatically. Like, typically a guy doesn't go from being just a spot up, weak side catch and shoot guy to being like the point guard of the team. And that's because no LeBron, no Luka, no Austin, no Marcus Smart. And we've seen with Luke, like, he can, he's been a solid secondary playmaker, and he gets teams into the blender defensively, and he can drive and play make a little bit. But we have seen a dramatic shift here over these last couple of games with his role. And we've also seen, though, all of a sudden his 3-point shot isn't falling. It's a little bit tougher for him to create his own offense. And just kind of thinking about what Luka has had to do every single night, what Austin has had to do, what LeBron has had to do, and those guys also being asked to defend at a certain level and play with a certain amount of energy and force. And like, you just see that being the primary ball handler and running the offense does take a lot out of you, and it's difficult to shoot and have efficient offensive nights when you are doing that. So I think that gives us a little bit more perspective into what Luka and Austin and LeBron have each had to deal with to varying degrees. I think Luka the most, of course, but Austin obviously earlier in the season, and then more recently LeBron earlier in the season. So, and then this is going to be the new normal for LeBron. So I just think that's been interesting to see, of like, when you can empower a role player to and highlight the passing, and like his passing has been great. I mean, nearly double-digit assists in back-to-back games, but you've also seen there's a limitation offensively to him being an on-ball creator, and part of it is also just like the legs element of playing a certain amount of minutes, being asked to defend at a certain level, and also creating the offense at a certain level. Like, it is pretty physically taxing. DeAndre Ayton, 3 points, 3 rebounds, 1 for 4 shooting. Really disappointing performance against him. He has now gone 0 for 4 against OKC. I think, Luka did not play well in his couple games. Austin did not play well in the 3 games he played against OKC. But I think overall DeAndre was the most disappointing rotation guy against OKC because he basically was a no-show in all 4 of the games. After the game, JJ was asked about DA, and he had talked about a couple games ago trying to get DA more involved offensively. And JJ did not mince words. He said DA has not been able to catch the ball lately. He's not been able to establish position. He's not been able to seal. He's not been able to catch the ball. And he said not been able to catch the ball like 4 different times in his answer. That's as damning as it gets. When your coach is saying you can't catch the ball, it's pretty bad. It's pretty discouraging. Like JJ just did not hold back. He was like, yeah, he just can't catch the ball. And that's been something I've been observing lately with DA. Now, I think it's been beyond the 2 OKC games ago and the Dallas game and this OKC game. I think this has been the worst maybe 3-game stretch of the season for him in terms of catching the ball and establishing position. But his hands have been stone lately, and just like he has a lot of these turnovers where he just brings the ball down, or he doesn't hold the ball with enough strength and force, and he just gets stripped. And I can't remember a big man getting as stripped as consistently as he, or like a big man of a certain caliber. Sometimes you'll see like backup bigs come in and they're getting stripped left and right, and that's why they're more of a backup big. But like a starting big who's supposed to be counted on for 28, 30 plus minutes a night, his hands have been really rough lately. And I would say like rough in the entirety of the season to some degree, where he's had a lot of these turnover issues. And that was something I highlighted over the summer with DeAndre when I watched the film on him. Every single season of his career, his assists compared to his turnovers have been at least neutral, if not fewer assists. And part of that's like you're not really empowering him to pass the ball and play make, but part of it's also he is turnover prone because of the limitations with his handle and just with his hands. And I think we've seen that playing out in a big way lately. Then Jake LaRavia, another rough shooting performance for him. Like for me, it just continues to be, I like everything outside of the shooting, but the shooting is also something you can't ignore. So 2 points, 1 for 7 shooting, 0 for 4 on threes, 0 for 2 at the free throw line. We'll touch on the free throws for the group, but 7 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 1 block. I thought he played the best defense of the starting group. I thought overall he was the Lakers' best defender tonight. I mean, he can't guard Shea. And that's not a knock on him. It's just he's too slow to guard Shea. And that's just like, if the Lakers had Marcus Smart, he'd be the primary Shea guy. And then I think Jake could focus on other players on the Thunder roster. I'd be really interested to see what he looked like against Chet if they put him on Chet full time. And I mean, I guess I'd probably prefer him on J-Dub than Chet, but maybe even just putting him on Chet and him bodying Chet, and then you go Marcus on Shea, maybe LeBron on J-Dub. You're not going Luke on J-Dub. I mean, they don't have great defensive matchups right now, but I would be interested to see what that looks like. But yeah, he continues to be like a one-sided player right now. I think he's playing well defensively, and I think the rebounding tonight, he led the group in rebounding. I thought he provided a big boost in that regard, and 3 stocks led the group as well. But he's been a real offensive liability, and I think that's right now limiting his overall impact. Then off the bench, a lot to like with the younger guys. I thought every player, including, as aforementioned, Drew Timme, showed something tonight. Vando played the 5 minutes. I think the play he got pulled on, my read on the play was the time, so Kobe Buffkin, I think it was a pick and roll. Kobe Buffkin gets downhill. Vando's supposed to set a flare screen for Bronny. I think the timing was a little bit off there, where I think he might have cut a little bit early, and that allowed the defender to stay in Kobe's line of sight and prevent him from really getting too much more downhill. I think there's like a little bit of a timing issue there, like a little bit of attention to detail, which has been an issue for Vando. But that was the only thing I could come up with, because again, I went back and rewatched. JJ said there was a confluence of things that led to Vando getting pulled out, but that's the only thing I could come up with. And even then, that to me would be like a minor mistake that Vando shouldn't be committing, especially with his role so shaky right now. But I don't know if that was worth getting into the spat that they got into. Maxi Kleba, I thought he's not looked like the earlier version of himself lately. He's looked more like a guy who should be out of the rotation. Like he'll continue to do like some of the rebounding, the screening, the little things I do like, but I think the Lakers need more. Tonight he played because there was also no Jackson Hayes. So to recap, Lakers were without Luka and Austin, who are out the rest of the regular season into the playoffs. LeBron rested tonight. Marcus Smart continues to be out. He's now missed 8 straight games. And then Jackson Hayes was a late scratch. So Maxey got some of the backup minutes tonight. And yeah, I thought he was pretty underwhelming. And then as far as the young guys, there was a lot to like. So guy we have to start off with was Adu Thero, who stole the show tonight. I thought he was the guy who popped the most out of anybody. Like I would say Drew Timme was, for me, probably the best of the young guys, but you can make a case for Adu if you really wanted to. And I know people have been clamoring for Adu to play more, and he did, and he played well against the Thunder. He was second on among the bench guys in minutes. JJ said he played at his minutes restriction tonight, but 10 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 2 for 4 shooting, 5 for 10 at the free throw line. So he got to the free throw line a ton and kept splitting his free throws, just making 1 of 2, and just couldn't hit a couple of them in a row. But he popped off the screen in a real way. And he reminds me of, he's almost playing at a different speed than everybody else. And that is a great thing. Like I talked about this earlier in the season, and I don't invoke these names lightly, but there is something like Thompson 20 to him. He's not, I would say he's not as like overall as polished of an athlete or like those guys are almost more poetic or you know, almost like ballet dancers in a way. Like it's a little bit different, but there is an element of just like when Amen Thompson or Osar Thompson is on the floor, they are the best athlete and they stand out in an insane way that it's like, oh yeah, these dudes were built for this. And it's just like you're hoping to be the second best athlete on the floor. With Adu, that's how he looked tonight. Like he was the best athlete on the floor whenever he was out there. And I thought the defensive pressure, whether it was pressuring the ball or trying to get out in passing lanes and making catches difficult for guys, just you see when he leaps for rebounds, he's just, I mean, his head's like at the rim. It's crazy. And then offensively, I thought there was a lot to be encouraged by. So I liked his first shift or first half shift better than his second half shift. But it is worth noting that late in the second quarter, he took that shot from Chet Holmgren, which I was surprised was not ruled a flagrant foul 1. Like it was overturned to an offensive foul. I thought it should have been a flagrant foul 1, but got a forehead split open, had to get 8 stitches, and had to come back with a giant Band-Aid across his forehead. So like I thought that first shift of the second half, I thought he was a little like he took a 3 that didn't even hit the rim, basically was far right, hits the backboard, and had a couple turnovers in that sequence of just dribbling and passing turnovers. So he was a little bit shaky there at first, but then I thought he rounded into form in the fourth quarter shift that he had, and just the violence with which he attacks the rim. Like that's another thing that I see in terms of similarities with the Thompson twins. Like his launch point and just the force that he attacks the rim with, and him as a driver or him as a cutter. I do prefer him more as a cutter than a driver. You saw, like, I think he's still a limited ball handler and he's still a limited shooter, but just his activity and energy and he's bouncing up and down around the court. And like, he also reminded me of, from Fast and Furious, like Nas when they hit the Nas button and it's just the turbo boost. Like he's just that insane of a specimen and an athlete, and it just really popped for the Lakers tonight. So I don't know what this is going to lead to as many people have been clamoring for him to be playing more. I think we see a night like tonight. It's like I wish we had seen more of this earlier in the season. Now he has been dealing with the knee stuff on and off. We saw after the Detroit game, he had to be put on ice for a bit. And so right now, I just doesn't seem like his body is able to handle a full-time rotation role. But for as long as it can handle it, and as long as he is not putting himself at risk, I think the Lakers have to continue to give him some opportunity here and really see what they have, because he's such a unique player, and specifically a unique player within the context of this roster. And even comparing him to Vando, for example, right? Because I think that's like they're roughly there's some similarities between Adu and Vando, like in the general premise of athletic defender with a shaky offensive game. Both guys check those boxes, right? But you see with Adu, I think the cutting instincts are already on par, if not ahead of Vando. Vando plays with a very high motor. I would like argue Adu might even have a higher motor than Vando. He's certainly more athletic than Vando from a jumping perspective and just that aerial vertical attack that he can have. And like he's already kind of more polished than Vando offensively. I don't know if that's a crazy thing to say for a rookie who's barely played, but I think he's got a little bit more wiggle and bounce to his offensive game than Vando does. I would say he's a better ball handler and better shooter is a stretch, but I just think if you look at like what he was doing even last year before he entered the league and what he's been able to do at the G League level, I think there's like a little bit more of a natural shot and a little bit more of natural offensive creation than Vando has. And I only compare him to Vando because that is someone who he has been compared to in like the player archetype discussion. But I really liked what we saw from Adu, and I hope we see more of it down the stretch here. All right, for those who are in the chat pre-show, my AirPods officially have died here. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen because you guys can't see it. I don't know what's going on with ESPN's box score. But then Nick Smith Jr. and Kobe Buffkin both started to pop off in the fourth quarter. Nick Smith had 11 points and 2 assists. Kobe Buffkin, 9 points, 4 assists. Kobe Buffkin's game is just so smooth, and I would like to see a little bit more efficiency from him. I feel like that is, as the season has progressed, he's become more of a guy looking for his own shot. I've felt when he's out there in the, like, there's a little bit of, I would say Dalton's actually improved in this, but like going back to like last season or even earlier this season, it felt like whenever Dalton was in crunch time or garbage time, he was just looking to gun, and all he really cared about was like, how many points can I score? How many shots can I get up? Kobe Buffkin's had some elements of that, but I thought tonight found a better balance with the 4 assists and just his ball handling, his guile, and just his ability to get downhill and just make things happen. I've been encouraged by. Nick Smith, again, started to heat up and had a little scoring flurry there in the fourth quarter. DK hit a couple shots late. I would say he was probably the young player who I was least impressed with because before that stretch, I think he had started 0 for 4, did have 4 rebounds, but also had 3 turnovers. And his passing tonight had 2 terrible turnovers where he telegraphed his pass, and it was clear that was not an opening and turned the ball over, and also got stuffed on a drive. So Dalton, I mean, crazy thing with Dalton that I feel like hasn't been talked about enough. In 12 days, he's turning 25. Like, Dalton is basically about to be entering his prime, and you could argue among all the young guys, maybe with the exception of Bronny, who had a rough night tonight, shooting the ball 2 for 9, 0 for 5 on threes. Like, I mean, I think Nick Smith Jr. and Kobe Buffkin and Adu, Andrew Timme are all ahead of Dalton right now. And Bronny has been playing better lately. And you at least see some of the defensive potential he has. Chris Magnon came in and I thought defended his ass off and had a nice finish. I think it was in transition, but pushing the ball, just being a pest. He just was named to G League All Defense second team. And so just a lot to like with the young guys tonight. And that was probably the biggest positive thing for me. That's why I know a couple people in the chat noted, like, why was I smiling in the thumbnail? Lakers were without their 4 best players, and then you throw in Jackson, they're without 5 of their 7, 8 best players, whatever. They were going to lose to the Thunder. They were going to lose to the Thunder in emphatic fashion. Lakers were 18.5 point underdogs tonight, which was the highest or largest home underdog they had been since 1990. So you had to go back 36 years for the last time the Lakers were this big of a home underdog. Lakers are going to lose this game. They technically fared better than they did last week, being tied 42-42, only losing this game by 36 instead of the 43 they lost to last week. So there was some progress. I also think OKC took their foot off the gas the first 18 minutes of the game. No J-Dub tonight, who I thought really killed the Lakers in that game last week. But the Lakers are going to lose this game, so I don't want to overreact to them getting blown out against the best team in the NBA when they didn't have LeBron tonight. Like, I expect them to get blown out. But the young guys, I thought, each flashed different things, and some guys stood out more than others. But I left at least encouraged that the young guys got some minutes and reps, and I think there's a legitimate competition here for who's going to pop as guy number 8 or number 9. Then stat of the night, 14 for 31 on free throws for LA. They shot 45% on free throws. OKC shot 21 for 41 on threes, which means that OKC shot better on threes than the Lakers shot at the free throw line tonight, which is just an absurd stat. And they nearly shot better from the floor than they did from the free throw line. They shot 44% from the floor, 45% at the free throw line. An abysmal shooting night at the line for LA. And it was actually their worst free throw percentage since February 25th, 2013. So I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to assume Dwight Howard played in that game because that was the 2012-13 season with Dwight Howard and Steve Nash. So you have to go back to the Dwight Howard first tenure to the last time the Lakers shot this poorly at the line. I would posit that there was some hack-a-Dwight going on that night. And just like that was 13 years ago, over 13 years ago, the last time the Lakers shot this poorly at the free throw line. And then takeaway number 1, JJ and Vando get into it. So I already touched on JJ and Rui, and I already touched on JJ and DA. So quickly, JJ and Rui got into it, or more so JJ getting into Rui on the few minutes into the game, calls timeout, lights up Rui, pulls him for the next 5-6 minutes. And then DA is pretty critical of him after the game, not only noting that he has not been able to catch the ball lately, but also he had a question at the end that was about sort of trying to figure out the right 9 guys. And he noted that as they've done all season, they're going to play the best 5, and he meant like the best center, that particular night, and whoever's playing the hardest. So I took that as, with no Jackson tonight and DA having the night that he had, I took that as like a little bit of a shot at DA. But the main course was JJ and Vando. So JJ calls a timeout 16 seconds into the second quarter. And according to him, there had been a confluence of things that had been brewing and building toward him pulling Vando. And I don't know if he meant confluence of things tonight or confluence of things just throughout the season, because we've discussed it several times before. JJ just has not trusted Vando. I don't think he believes in him or his skill set. I think that's been reflected by his role. And I think he's had a much shorter leash than he had under Darvin Ham. And Darvin started him and played him a certain amount up until Vando started to get injured. And with JJ, it's just been like he had LeBron returns, he has the 8 straight games, the NPCD. He's almost forced into playing with Austin's banged up, Rui's banged up, Luka's banged up, LeBron is still limited minutes. It's like, all right, we have to play Vando. And then he played him, he fell out of the rotation, played him again. Now he's fallen out of the rotation again. So he just does not believe or trust Vando's game. But so he calls the timeout. Vando is clearly ticked off and goes. JJ's now, because the way a timeout typically works is the actual part where, like, every timeout is different, but typically I would say, especially if it's not a late game situation or late quarter situation where you need to be locked into like running a certain play to score. Typically a timeout is the coaches go to kind of step out near the free throw line and the players go and chill for like 30 seconds to a minute, sometimes even a minute and a half. And the players are kind of talking amongst themselves, getting a breather, talking to the trainer, getting some water, whatever. And there's like almost a little bit of a break between the two sides. Then the coaches discuss whatever they need to discuss. Then they come back to the bench, they huddle up, and then JJ will be the one sitting in front of the guys. And that's when, like, you typically see those moments as the moments the coach is drawing something up. That's often at the end of a timeout. That's like the last 30 seconds to a minute of a timeout. And timeouts are typically somewhere between 2 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on what's going on. So in this case, as JJ steps out, he starts drawing on the whiteboard with a couple coaches next to him, and Vando beelines over to him and starts pointing toward the bench. So my read on that was like something got screwed up, and Vando was kind of blaming someone else, like, you're blaming me for this, but actually this guy messed this up. And JJ kind of dismisses it. And sort of is like, I'm trying to draw this up. Like, what are you doing right now? Then JJ goes back to the bench eventually, and Vando's standing up. And then I think this has been now festering in JJ, and he's seething. And then he starts chirping at Vando, and then they start going back and forth. And then Vando starts to step towards JJ. JJ gets up off the bench, and then they both have to be separated. So JJ said that was a normal interaction after the game. To me, I think these things happen more so privately in practice and the locker room and behind closed doors. So it does stand out more when it happens publicly. I don't think a coach and a player getting into it is rare. We've seen JJ get into it with other guys. Like, I think that happens. A coach and a player getting into it to like having to be held back publicly that early into a game, that I would say is on the rarer side. So Vando gets benched the rest of the game. He does not speak to the media after the game. And JJ said, again, confluence of things led to this, that it's not personal on his end, which I thought him pointing out not personal on his end also added a little fuel to the fire, because I think typically you'd be like, it wasn't personal, or, it's not personal between, like, there's nothing there. But the clarification of on his end, I thought was like, okay, he's kind of indicating Vando might have a problem with him. And then he also noted that he was like, we're undermanned. We all have to be on the same page. Everyone has to be locked in. And, I thought I had to take Vando out, and he reacted to that. And I thought that he reacted to that was also, JJ, like, reading between the lines, was basically like, I thought this dude was making mistakes, and I decided to pull him, and he overreacted and stepped to me. And it wasn't personal on my end. I was just reacting to how he was performing, and he lost his cool. And so we'll see what the aftermath of this is. I think it's too early to tell. I think it's probably something that gets swept under the rug and isn't an issue moving forward. But I do think we clearly have enough of a sample size at this point where if JJ had his choice, Vando would not be in the primary rotation. So maybe this does spell the end of Vando in the primary rotation, especially the shorthanded rotation. But thought it was really interesting. And this feels like it had been kind of brewing for a bit between the two, with Vando's role being ever shifting and finally reared its head. Then takeaway number 2, injury update on Luka and Marcus. Marcus remains day-to-day. JJ said there was no setback technically on Marcus, but he did do on-court work last week, and he didn't feel comfortable after the on-court work. So they have been cautious with it, and he is expected back at some point this week, but JJ did not specify when. And then he said that Luka is in good spirits. He would not divulge when Luka will be back from Spain, but he did say he's trying to get back on the court ASAP. So make of all that what you will. And then West standings watch tonight. OKC beat the Lakers. Minnesota beat Indiana. Houston beat Phoenix. Denver's up a game, full game now, win column and loss column. A game total, but like one in each column. Lakers and Rockets are tied, but Lakers have the tiebreaker. Minnesota is 3 games back in the loss column of both the Lakers and the Rockets. So unless they win out, Houston's going to be ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota will be the 6th seed. They do play each other. So if Minnesota does win out, they would be beating Houston in the process, and that would potentially swing that between 5 and 6. But with how shorthanded they are right now, they've continued to win. But realistically, there's a chance Minnesota could jump back up into 5, but they would have to win out, and Houston would actually have to lose out, which they do. Like Minnesota can beat them directly, but I think if Houston wins at least one more time, Minnesota is going to be the 6th seed. And what this all means for the Lakers is that they are almost certainly going to be in the 4-5 matchup. It's just a matter of if they are the 4 seed or the 5 seed. And in my opinion, I think there is a big difference there. I know it doesn't sound like much, but especially as an underdog, as a shorthanded underdog, like the Rockets will be heavy favorites over the Lakers, with Luka and Austin projected to miss the entire series. Even if Luka's projected to return at the end of the series, the Rockets will be heavy favorites. I think getting home court advantage is going to be important. So the Lakers have to win, I think, probably 2 of the final 3 games of the season. We'll see if they can do that. They have not been competitive in these. I mean, they were competitive with a Dallas team that had lost 13 straight home games and scored the most points they scored in 6 weeks against the Lakers. And then they lost by 36 to OKC, competitive for a quarter and a half. Like, they've not looked good, just to put it as bluntly as possible. And I am a bit concerned. I think if I had to project, I would project 1 and 2 right now over the final 3 games with them losing to Golden State and Phoenix. But it's on them to prove me and anyone else wrong that they can go at least 2 and 1, if not 3 and 0, and put themselves at least in the mix for the 4 seed, if not potentially even jump back up to number 3. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Gary Singh. Thank you for the super chat. Vando's been horrible all year. His defense has slipped, can't lock down anymore, and horrible on rotations. Rather have a do out there. Agree with JJ. So I think this is a little aggressive on the Vando assessment, but I would say I've been more on the JJ side in general. I think that people have been holding on to the previous version of Vando more than the current version of Vando. Like, I don't think the current version of Vando is some locked in rotation guy, or I off the top of my head, like I mean, he would not play for OKC. He would not play for San Antonio. He wouldn't play for Denver. I think Minnesota and Houston are borderline, but might be more like matchup based. But I think there's been like this notion that I know a lot of people have wanted him to start or have a certain like big bench role. I don't think he has played to that level this season. I would agree. Like, what's funny is like the shooting has actually been more stable, and I've had more confidence in the shot, but the ball like, unless it's like a wide open 3, any other scenario offensively, even like dribble handoffs, I'm a bit skittish with just, is he going to turn the ball over? Is he going to make the right read? I think there has been slippage offensively outside of just that. And then defensively, I would also agree. Like, I think he's one of those guys that, like, eye test wise, he might stand out a little bit more because he is athletic and playing with a certain amount of motor and force. And especially, I mean, like, if you're comparing him to like Rui, right? Vando looks like a defensive player of the year, but I still think that he's not been at the, like, I think it's been like 2 years ago, or his first year with the Lakers, I think was his best defensive performance. I think 2024, it slipped a bit. I think last year it slipped a bit. And I think this year it's continued to slip a bit. And he certainly had the stretch earlier in December and January where I thought he was impactful. And like the rebounding is the thing that I think he's been great at and continues to be. I actually think his rebounding might be his best trait right now. And he is a very versatile defender, so he can guard guards and he can guard big men. And I think he's one of the few like true 1 through 5 defenders in the league. I just think there was a time where he was like an all defense second team caliber defender. And I don't think he's been close to that caliber of level. Like if you look at the names that are going to be on the first couple of defensive teams from a perimeter standpoint, I don't think he's in the same ballpark as those guys. So I've understood it to a degree from JJ. At the same time, I think he's tried, like even go back to last game against Dallas, like I also think Vando's gotten the short end of the stick with some of the lineup stuff where he's just played in some bad lineups. Now, at some point, when you're consistently on the wrong side of plus minus and net rating, and like we do have to acknowledge some of that, especially if you're a bench player who's supposed to be like this spark plug guy who changes the game. That just has not been the reality for most of the season. And JJ has talked about that a few times where it's just the Lakers often lose the Vando minutes. And like even this stretch recently when they were killing everybody, Vando was a net negative for most of that stretch and was like the lone rotation guy who continued to be a net negative. So I've been lower on Vando than I think most people have, or not most people, but some people. I know there's like a Vando hive or, some people who really believe he should be starting or playing a certain amount. I haven't seen that. And I think with where things are at right now with JJ, maybe it is just time for a do. Alma, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, how does DA get paid millions to stand around and do nothing? Also, can't see how we move dead weight such as Vando, DK without attaching picks, which we don't have. Very grim outlook. To be completely honest, I would throw in DA as dead weight. I don't think he should be the starting center next season. I think if you judge him on his highs, yes, his highs have been starting level center worthy. He has dominated Rudy Gobert in the head-to-head matchups. He had a really impressive showing against Wemby earlier in the season. He had the late game clutch situations against Denver and Houston, right? The other, like the New York game, it was kind of what kickstarted his better stretch of play. But his lows are like, he's basically unplayable with his lows, but the Lakers have to play him, especially a night like tonight, just like a certain amount because Jackson's out. And I think he's way too inconsistent and has way too many lows to be a starting center for a team with 50 plus win ambitions, second round plus ambitions. Like, I think he could do it in some of the like lottery teams in the East or play-in teams in the East. But I think the Lakers have had a lot of their success in spite of his inconsistency, and I think it's held them back at times, especially in the second half of the season. So I would throw him in because I don't see with the recent play how he's opting out and getting a bigger contract. So I think they have 3 guys that they're really going to have to figure out like how they're going to manage those contracts, especially when 2 of them in Vando and DK clearly are not trusted, or we'll say trusted by JJ, right? So, I mean, DK doesn't DNP CD against Dallas. JJ goes to Nick Smith Jr. and Kobe Buffkin before he goes to DK. And Adu at least had the injury issue of he's been injured the last year, and JJ's been very conservative with his minutes. Dalton, there's no excuse to not play Dalton other than just JJ doesn't think he's that good and doesn't really trust him. So yeah, I don't know how they get out of the Vando, DK, and DA contracts outside of just having to put picks on the table and attach them to them, right? And I talked about like the framework of a trade. I'm not advocating for this particular trade, but people have talked about the price of a Herb Jones trade, and could you do something like a first for Herb or a first for a starter? Pick your starter that you would like the Lakers to go get, can you do a first for that player and then attach a second first to get off the Vando contract and maybe even throw in Dalton or DA into that trade? And it's like, I mean, it's a pretty hefty price, especially when it in a vacuum is almost like 2 firsts for one player. But you're also getting off that. And like if they don't have Vando, DK, and DA on the books, that's an extra like 24 million, almost 25 million in cap space that you can create. So now you go from 50 million, 55 million, wherever they end up, to 75 million, 80 million potentially. Now you're getting back a player, so that would offset that a little bit. In the Herb Jones example, that would, I think, is making 14 next year, so that offsets it. And now you're at 60 to 65 million, but that's still better than the status quo. And you're also off of these contracts. I think DK, someone will, the Kings will talk themselves into DK, right? Like someone will you just got to send them the YouTube clip of the game against the Jazz last season. But DA and Vando, I think the Vando contract's really rough at making nearly 24 million over the next 2 years, and then DA, I think the right, like, jury's been out on him for a while. Peter, quickly before I answer this question, Peter, I want to give you a shout out because you were on the Minnesota stuff. I was a little bit skeptical. I was like, they've continued to win. I mean, they beat the Pacers tonight. They had lost 3 straight before that, but in general, like they've been okay without Ant and McDaniels. But Minnesota is I think that they, as long as those guys are compromised, they are the team you want to play in round 1. It's just the Lakers are now unlikely to be the 3 seed. But thank you for the super chat, Peter. You know, hard to believe SGA and Vando were one and done teammates at UK. That is University of Kentucky. That is crazy. That is very crazy, actually. I forgot that. It feels like Vando has been in the league less time than that, but that's crazy. And then Peter follows up, as of today, do you think DA picks up his option? I do. Because I talked about this a couple weeks back, maybe a few weeks back, that I went through every cap sheet and every center situation, and there are only a few teams I think he would even be in consideration to start for. And then that doesn't necessarily align with the teams with cap space. So depending on like Utah might have some space, but they're going to have Kessler, Triple J, Filipowski, Markkanen could be a small ball 5. Like they don't need DeAndre Ayton. Then you have Brooklyn, who's got Nick Claxton, Day'Ron Sharp. They don't need DeAndre Ayton. And then Chicago's the one team, and it would be a very Bulls thing to do, to be like, we're going to, like, there are some similarities between him and Vucevic. And I guess you could maybe see a scenario in which Chicago's trying to be more, I mean, they should just tear it down and go full rebuild and get off the treadmill of mediocrity, and maybe reshuffling and cleaning house with their front office might encourage that. But it would be a very Bulls move if they were like, DeAndre Ayton, here's 2 years, 20 million, 2 years, 22 million, something like that. And you're not a crazy contract from like monetarily, it's still relatively low, but sort of like you be our placeholder center for the next couple years as we try to compete in the East when we really should be rebuilding. Very Bulls move. Otherwise, like, you just go team by team. Every team has a starting center. So doesn't mean he couldn't have value for somebody as a backup, but I think he clearly still views himself as a starting level center. And I think he was looking at this year as a bounce back season to propel him into a bigger contract. I just don't see the situation or the team. And again, quickly scanning the West, like maybe the Clippers, I think I mentioned them before, but they prioritize talent and skill over everything. They've overlooked some character flaws from guys in recent seasons, and have even signed some controversial guys. So maybe the Clippers, they also, Benedict Matherin's on that team. Mathurin and Ayton share agents. But I mean, Golden State, but he's not really a Golden State type player. Then you just, go through the rest of the West. I don't see where he makes any sense. And then go back to the East. Yeah, I mean, Indiana is a backup to Zubats, but again, that's not really, there's not a clear-cut situation for him. So, I mean, Toronto maybe, but still probably as backup to Jakob Poeltl based on how much they paid him. Like, if you just look at the landscape, I don't see a situation where he's getting a multi-year deal that's a raise, or even a raise at all, just or starting, right? Because I think his ideal situation was to get like double-digit multi-year raise and start somewhere, whether it was the Lakers or elsewhere. I don't think it's happening with the Lakers, and I don't think it's happening elsewhere. So, Eduardo, thank you for the super chat. Braun faked an injury to avoid BTA. No, I think Lakers have a tough stretch here of 3 games in 4 days. So I think it's more so that the Lakers are trying to be cautious. And as JJ said today, like, they don't care about seeding anymore. I think they should care in the context of if they can be the 4 instead of the 5, that would be preferred. But if they're not going to care about seeding, then the most important thing is remaining healthy. And LeBron has been dealing with the sciatica and the left foot arthritis all season. So I don't think there's any surprise LeBron didn't play in this game. And I don't think he's trying to avoid BTA. I just think it made note, like, I think the game would have been more competitive if LeBron played, but the Lakers were going to lose regardless. Like, they lose by 15 instead of, or 20 instead of 36. Like, it would have honestly just put Miles and put LeBron at risk of injury for no, like, imagine if LeBron played in this game and he got injured against OKC, whether it was intentional for OKC or not. That would be, I mean, then the season, like, season's already over in my opinion, but that would just be like, all right, like, they're in the coffin. It's they're going into the ground. Like, it's over. So the only like shred of hope that the Lakers have right now is that LeBron can put the cape back on and carry them for a few games in the first round. If they don't have LeBron, that's not happening. Savage, thank you for the super chat. They made me proud, tying the game up 3 times and making OKC take Shea off the bench through the first quarter and a half. Poor DA, Rui, and Vando. Haha. I thought the first 18 minutes of the game were encouraging, and I think there's some things that I didn't focus too much on the game outside of like the individual performances, but I think there are some things that you could extrapolate out into having some more confidence. Like, the good news for the Lakers is they're not playing OKC in round 1. So there is, I think, a pretty big gap between OKC and Houston. And now there are some similarities between the two in terms of the defense, the athletes. Houston is worse on both sides of the ball, but there are, like, we did see they were able to physically overwhelm the Lakers and out athlete them at times in those 2 Houston matchups. Take out Luka and Austin, and it's going to be really tough to, I think, be competitive. But the Lakers were competitive with OKC for a quarter and a half, and at this stage, I still don't want to like pat them on the back and give them moral victories, because the standard should be higher, but the standard is also the standard. They were without their 4 best players and their best, backup center, and already at full strength, they were going to be notable underdogs against OKC. Now, without those guys, like, this is not supposed to be a competitive game. So, yeah, I was certainly encouraged by the spirit to start the game, with the exception of some hiccups for those 3 in particular. Pincy23, thank you for the super chat. Suns could play the bench versus the Lakers now. Good point here because, the Suns are essentially locked into 7. I think the one thing... So there's like 3 or 2 big remaining games for the Lakers. One is tomorrow, OKC plays the Clippers. The reason that's a big game is because if OKC wins, they will lock up the 1 seed and likely rest their guys at least the final game of the season, if not the final couple, and probably Friday in Denver. And that would mean that Denver, assuming OKC rests enough of their guys and Denver doesn't mess around as they have the last couple games and then won them in the clutch, Denver will likely go, in that case, like at least 2-1 down the stretch and ice the 3 seed. That is also noteworthy, though, because if the Clippers lose, that does create enough of separation there where Phoenix is just locked into the 7 seed. And then to your point, they just don't care about that game against the Lakers. If the Clippers win and they're on the heels of the Suns still, that then potentially puts the Suns in a scenario where they do care about that Lakers game. And then it also, though, puts the Thunder and Spurs in a scenario where they're still within striking distance of each other. And maybe OKC does go and try in that game on Friday, and Denver could beat them, but they certainly would not be favored. And OKC would be the clear favorite in that. So then that could have ramifications of but what if Denver beats OKC? Then they might get San Antonio's best shot in the final game because maybe the 1 seed is up for grabs at that point. So I think that the most likely scenario here is going to be OKC locking up the 1, and it goes OKC, San Antonio, Denver, Minnesota 6. It's just a matter of LA versus Houston jockeying down the stretch here. And then Phoenix, Clippers, Portland, Golden State. I think 8 of the 10 seeds right now are pretty much close to locked up. But depending on the OKC Clippers result tomorrow, and then also the second game would be that Houston Minnesota game on Friday. That's a huge game. Now, again, at this point, Minnesota's pretty close to being locked into 6, but I think it's still a big game because if they beat Houston, that makes it less likely Houston gets the 4 over the Lakers. If Houston wins, that's maybe their most losable remaining game, and that maybe is what pushes Houston to getting the 4. So those to me are the 2 most important. Like the Lakers' most important games are their 3 games, but aside from the Lakers' own games, I think the 2 most important games remaining are OKC Clippers tomorrow, because that will either mean OKC's resting down the stretch and that gives Denver an edge, but also means that the Clippers are too far away from Phoenix and Phoenix will rest, or it means that OKC and San Antonio are still within striking distance. They might be going for it against Denver, but then that also means that the Suns and Clippers are still within striking distance and Phoenix might go for it against the Lakers. So either way, it could help or hurt the Lakers depending on how it plays out. But those are a couple of the games to monitor down the stretch here, but certainly a chance that Phoenix just rests their guys. Pinty again, thank you for the super chat. Vando and DK plus 26 and 33 first for Herb Jones and Misi. I think I would do that. So monetarily, it's actually pretty close. Lakers might even be taking on a little bit of money, but I'd be okay with it in this scenario. And then I'm still not sure on... I like Misi as a prospect. I'm not sure if he tops out as a starting level center. I think he could be a really good backup. And if all you could add... Like, you could still go get a center in a different context. This doesn't mean this is your only center move. But yeah, I mean, if you somehow end up with a better starting center, Misi and Jackson off the bench, I would like a 3-headed center rotation. And then Herb, I think, is a great fit next to Luka and Austin. And I know that really my bigger concern with him is the health, not the shooting. The shooting has fluctuated, but I think playing off of Luka and Austin, he'd shoot much better and get much higher shot quality. It's a steep price though. And so I guess it just depends how you view going for it now versus later, because if the Lakers aren't moving the picks, there's certainly a argument for that. It's just, if you're only relying on free agency or someone like fortuitously dumping a player on you, it could be slim pickings or slimmer pickings than you're hoping for. I think the Lakers are probably going to have to put at least one of the picks on the table to really get some motion going. Sucker free money. Thank you for the super chat. Would you trade AR 1-for-1 for Bane? Yes or no? My opinion, Bane a better fit next to Luka in high stakes, bigger passes, better 3-point percentage, 1-3/4 defender, and Orlando needs a point guard. That's an interesting one. I'm pulling up Bane's contract and Bane's overall stats this season, just to make sure I'm being as up to date and accurate as possible. So his contract, he has 3 more years left, 39.4, 42.2, 44.9. So Austin could be in a similar range depending on the contract he signs. So you would be, I think, getting a couple more years of Austin compared to 3 years of Bane. And I don't think he's extension eligible yet. And I don't even think you necessarily want to do that. They are the same age. But from a contract perspective, the trade-off between Austin versus Bane is Austin will be locked up for 2 more years, in theory, going into next season. And could be at a lower number than Bane, though maybe is in similar ballpark. And with the raises, I think would be, if he is in a similar ballpark, it will be a similar raise structure. In terms of the season, so Bane averaged 24-4. One part I'll immediately disagree with you on is I don't think Bane is a better passer than Austin. I actually don't think they're close to the same caliber of passer. Like Austin only averages 5.5 assists, which is still an assist and a half more than Bane, but that's largely due to being somewhere between the number 2 and number 3 for most of the season next to Luka and LeBron. We've seen in those games where Austin is empowered as more of the primary ball handler, he's frequently up there at 7, 8, 9 assists. So I don't think they're close to being similar passers. And then shooting perspective, Bane. So they're pretty similar percentage-wise. Austin's got a boost in the 2-point percentage and field goal percentage. Bane's got the boost in the 3-point percentage and free throw percentage. Austin gets to the line more. Austin rebounds more. He assists more, and he scores more. So it's an interesting trade because I think in a vacuum, I think Austin's better than Bane, and I think Bane is more, but conversely, I think Bane is more stable. I don't think Bane necessarily has as low of a floor as Austin can have in some of those matchups against physical teams. And to your point, I think there's like a couple key areas where I would give him the edge, where I think he's stronger defensively and he's a better shooter. So those are a couple of key things that if you wanted to argue from a fit perspective, those are a couple of like areas that you want sharper next to Luka. Conversely, though, I think Austin fits that secondary. Again, we've loosely called it the Kyrie, Jalen Brunson sidekick role. I think Austin's much closer to those two guys in the capabilities of what that secondary offensive creator has looked like next to Luka compared to Bane. I think Bane, I think Austin has got a much better handle and is a much better passer than Bane. So, and that, to even like the spirit of your question in the last point, like Orlando needs a point guard. Well, I think the Lakers need a second point guard too. And if you do go the Bane route, I think that like now all of a sudden, I think you actually need to find a solid backup point guard who could play 20, 25 minutes and even play next to Luka, because I think having another ball handler next to Luka is like a really key ingredient that like there's been three general archetypes that if you look at the two teams that Luka has had the most success with, it's been the athletic rim running pick and roll, active big man, right? And like the Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford type. The 2022 run was a little bit different. It was some more small ball, it was a lot of Maxey and Dwight Powell, but Dwight Powell fits that mold too. Like he's not as good as Gafford or Lively, but also that 2022 team wasn't as good as the 2024 team. Then you have the army of two-way guys of your PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., your Najee Marshall, et cetera. And then you have the secondary shot creator. Bane to me is kind of in between the shot creator and the two-way wing. I think he's been a little overrated defensively for a lot of his career. Now, I still think because of his strength and athleticism, like I would still put him ahead of Austin defensively, but that's a really interesting trade. I think for me, what this comes down to is I just think Austin's better. And I also like the possibility of, or the theoretical likelihood that he's going to have a couple more years left under contract, which is like part of the reason why Bane went for the 4 picks in the first place, was because Bane had 4 more years left. So having guaranteed locked in years for players in this age range is, I think, important. And so it's an interesting challenge trade. You can make the case for Bane, and I don't think you're wrong. Like, I think this is one of those trades where, depending on how you feel about it, depending on how you feel about Austin, depending on how you feel about Bane, if you want to argue Bane, I'm not going to fight you on it, right? I think you can make the case for him. I think for me, I just think Austin's better and fits arguably the most important role, but most or second most important role on a Luka team, close to perfectly, at least among realistic options. I think there's maybe some guys in the top 10 to 15 that could fit that role, but you're not necessarily getting them. So it's a really interesting trade. Because I Austin's going to be in the same ballpark contract wise, but especially if Austin's lower, and so you're saving some money on the first 3 years of the deal, and you're getting Austin for 2 more years. I lean Austin in that, but it is an interesting trade. Basketball. Thank you for the super chat. I know Miles has had a bad year / has a rough contract, but does that make him gettable for a first / big trade player exception / Ayton, then do the 2 firsts with Vando and DK for Herb? Let's pull up Miles Turner's contract. Immediately, my fear with Miles Turner, well, there's an age component here and there's a rebounding component. And I think he's one of these guys that, if you're going to go down the Miles Turner route, you need a certain baseline of rebounding with the rest of your group. I think Luka and LeBron do give you that baseline to a degree, but more recently, post All-Star break, one of the big flaws with the Lakers defense has actually been the defensive rebounding, and they have not been as good defensive rebounding. And Luka's rebounding had slipped a little bit. LeBron has not been rebounding at the same level this year as he did last year or typically, but it had been a bit of an issue for the group. And my fear with adding in Turner, so this year, he's 29. No, he just turned 30. This is his age 29 season, technically on Basketball Reference, but he just turned 30 a couple weeks ago. So he's going to be going into his age 31 season. They do it based on the birth date within the season, but technically he will be 31 at the end of next season. So I will consider it his age 31 season. This year, 12 points, 5 rebounds, a block and a half after 3 straight seasons of 16 plus points, 7 plus rebounds, 2 blocks. So he slipped in his scoring. He slipped in his shot blocking. He slipped in his rebounding. He slipped in his 3-point shooting. He slipped in his 2-point shooting. I think that's been the biggest disappointment. And he's been trending in the wrong direction. Actually, 5 straight seasons where he has declined with his 2-point shooting. So that is typically an indicator of a player regressing athletically and exiting their prime. Like, especially for a big man, you don't want to be on that trajectory from your 2-point percentage. So I mean, his contract isn't as bad as you would think in some ways, but he's got 3 more years left. 26.6, 27.9, 29.1. That's bad. I would probably. So I assume you're saying, are the Lakers getting the first here? Because at first I read this as the Lakers giving up a first, which I would not do. If the Lakers get a first and it's like, we'll send you Ayton as just to have a center, and you get this big trade exception, but you got to give us the first to get off the contract. If you get off Ayton and get a first, that's interesting, because I think there's a difference between 3, like as crazy, it's trivial, but like there is to me a notable difference between 3 firsts and 4 firsts, just in terms of your options. And then you mentioned the 2 firsts with Vando and DK. And then, so you get out of Vando, DK, and DA, you get Herb, you get Turner, and you get a first. If it's giving up a first, I would not do that. I don't think he's good enough for that. But still, I think the bigger issue for me too is like he's not a bad lob threat, but he's not the type of, like, I think there'd be some similarity to the awkwardness that Luka and DA had for a while. Just looking at, for example, his dunks, right? Like his career high in dunks is 86, and that was his second season in the league. The last few years he's been between 60 and 70. This year he's down at 24. Now, part of that is the way he's being used in Milwaukee, but I think you need a true lob threat with Luka to unlock the best version of him offensively. And there is a pick and pop element here with Turner that I think would be really dangerous. But I just think, especially if you're paying Austin potentially or doing the Bane trade, whatever, if you have that salary slot locked in next to Luka, Turner kind of becomes your third guy, at least from a salary perspective. And I just don't want Miles Turner to be my third guy, even if I'm getting a pick. So the pick is appealing, but and also that would be some of your cap space gone, right? Because he's making 26.6, so you're taking on almost 19 million, and then with Herb, Vando, DK, that's close to a wash. You actually like save a little bit there. So let's say you end up like net taking on 17 million. That cuts your cap space into like the 33 to 38 range, and that is not even factoring in potentially retaining LeBron, Rui, Marcus, Luke. You could earmark that room exception for one of those guys, but that's like let's just say it's Luke for argument's sake. Now you're trying to split 33 to 38 million between LeBron, Rui, Marcus, and ideally like another player or two. I don't think you just want to add Herb and Miles Turner. I think you still want to add at least one more player, if not a couple, and ideally with a little bit of money. So yeah, I just think I think the contract's too bad, and I don't think the Lakers are in a situation where they could afford that on their cap sheet and like build the type of team that, like, I think at this point Miles is like trending toward being a really good backup, or he can be a starter if you have a very physical, good, like for example, I think Miles plus Aaron Gordon is, or like Miles plus Julius Randle. I think with the Randle one in particular, it's a nice pairing because like Randle is more the brawny physical four and he's a good rebounder. So that kind of offsets some of Turner's weaknesses. And then Turner's a good defender, good rim protector, although he has slipped a bit in that regard, but like would complement Randle well. With Gordon, he's not a defensive minus, so it actually would just be a really good 4-5 pairing defensively. And then Turner would be more the shot blocker, rim protector. Gordon's more of the rebounder, the enforcer. So I think like those types of bigs he could pair well with as a starter, but you need a particular build. I don't think the Lakers have that build. I mean, with LeBron, you could argue he checks that box too, but I still like, then I think the fifth spot in the starting group, if you're going to go Austin, Luka, LeBron, Turner, that has to be a big play. Like it has to be more like a Peyton Watson type or some big wing who can rebound as well. And then if Turner's like your fourth best rebounder, I'm cool with it in a lineup. But if Turner's even like your third best rebounder, I start to get a little bit concerned with the rebounding. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Jake is an absolute brutal watch offensively. Has to be one of the worst offensive players in the league that gets 25 plus minutes a night. Respect the hustle. The ultimate backhanded compliment. So I referenced this a couple games ago. He is shooting the lowest percentage in the NBA on wide open threes of a certain volume. I think it's 100 plus wide open threes. You're shooting 31%. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the bigger issue for me. If he's like bulldozing his way into the paint or just trying to play bully ball and he's maybe drawing contact and not getting fouls or not finishing through contact, whatever, like I'm ultimately okay with that because I don't think that should be a big part of his role anyway. And that's more of a 1 to 2, maybe like 3 shots a night max. And like, hopefully he hits 2 of the 3, but he's going to fluctuate between 0 of the 3 and 1 of the 3, 2 of the 3, 3 of the 3. I think he's going to net out like okay there. But the bigger issue to me has just been he will have the random game where he's a magnet ball, but for the most part, he's been a very unreliable 3-point shooter. And it's wild that this dude shot 42% on threes last year. Granted, it was a very small sample size, 2 3-point attempts per game, but it's tough to go from like that to also like high quality of looks. Like if you think about playing off of Luka and Austin and LeBron, it's like a role player's dream. It's a shooter's dream. And we've seen Luke Kennard thrive with it. We've seen Rui thrive with it. Jake just has not been able to do it. So, I mean, for him, the clear thing this summer is like he needs to be like chained to the 3-point arc and just be going around the 5 primary spots and hitting, 3 to 500 threes a day in each spot. Like that would be my Jake LaRavia offseason plan because he does he's a good rebounder. I think based on some of the foot speed and just general athleticism disadvantages to his game, he still is like a solid multi-positional switch across guards up until bigs. Like, I don't know if to me, he's not quite a 1 through 5 guy just because I think he's more of, to me, like a 2 through 5, 2.5 through 5 guy, where I like him more on front court guys and forwards and bigs rather than guards. But the offensive end has just been holding him back. And like, if he could turn that 31% into like 35%, which is still below average, especially on open threes, that would go a long way in making him a more valuable rotation guy. So, I get you. Like, I get you. It's been a rough stretch for him. Peter, thanks for the shout out. Thank you for the super chat. He says, thanks for the shout out. What's the max you would give AR for years and money? It's tough to say because, well, so for years I would give him 5. I think he's going to push for that, and he's earned that, in my opinion. The money, I think you can make a strong statistical case that Austin is worth the max. I think within the context of some of the injuries that he's had and some of the struggles he has had against some of the best and most athletic defenses in the league and just some of the best teams in the league this season, I would love to negotiate that down. And if I were the Lakers, I would even, maybe try to leverage the years against the money where it's like, okay, we'll give you the max for 3 years, but if you want 5 years, we want to negotiate that down a bit. So, I mean, I said, I floated out, like if he starts at 35, that, which is $6.5 or $7 million under the max he could start in year one, that ends up being about 5 years, $210 million, which is still $30 million or so under his maximum, which, over the course of 5 years, nets out to about $6 million, $6 million lower year over year. That would maybe be my goal. I think I would go up to the high 30s and approaching 40. I think a big thing with this is that ultimately Austin's contract is not going to determine what the Lakers do this offseason in terms of the cap space plan is with Austin already on the books with the cap hold. And then once they do whatever moves they do with that 55 million, then they re-sign Austin on top of that. And all of the additional money is going above the cap and going closer to the first apron. So if it really came down to, if it was a situation where it was like, if you're paying Austin $30 million, you can keep Marcus or keep LeBron or keep Rui or add someone else. But then if you sign him to 42 million, you can't. That's where I think the penny pinching or the more critical lens of like, you got to fight to keep this 32 million and then keep that extra money to like do other moves. But that's just not the reality of the situation. The Lakers are going to do all of their moves before they re-sign Austin. And whether his number is 42.5 or 35, yes, it's a $7.5 million difference, but it's not affecting the quality of the team or the structure of the team. Now, at some point it could. I think that's more like multiple years in the future, but I think you could also get off that contract if you really want to. So I'm somewhere in the, I would say like mid to high 30s would be, I think, a win for the Lakers. That said, if he signs the max, I've said, I think 35 is his floor. I would be shocked if it's under that. Like, I think 30 is his absolute, 30 had been his absolute floor if he had like performed poorly in the playoffs. I don't think it was going to go below that. Now that he's not playing in the playoffs, most likely, I think 35 is more realistically his floor. But if they give him the max, I would not criticize that. I would be okay with it. But I know that's probably more of a minority opinion. You're asking what I would give. I would shoot to give somewhere in the mid to high 30s. That would be my preference, and to try to leverage the years against the total money, and that maybe ends up 5 years 220, 5 years 225, something like that, and you're 15 to 20 million under the max, and that nets out to what, like 4-ish million, somewhere like 4 to 5 million per year under the max. I think would be good for the Lakers, but I think it's going to be closer to the max, if not the max, than it is to like 25 or 30 million, as I've seen some people float. Like, that's just not, that's not happening. And if that's the offer the Lakers give, then Austin Reeves will be in a different jersey next season. Peter asks, Coach of the Year and Sixth Man. I have JB and Keldon. Also, I love SGA, but there will never be another that leads in BPM, OPM, VORP, OWS, PER, and not win MVP in Jokic. Yeah, I mean, I don't like overreacting to one game, but it was hard not to watch that Denver San Antonio game and just be like, this is cute that we're having this like SGA versus Jokic versus Wemby, and now Luka's out of the mix because of, we saw the straw poll. He was fourth in the straw poll, and now we don't even know if he's eligible. But I'm just like, you cannot tell me that SGA or Wemby is a better player than Jokic, and you cannot tell me that Wemby is a better player than Jokic in particular. And the fact that he's had a couple of huge games against Wemby and just that shot he hit over him, it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to win. I still think it's going to be SGA, but if I were voting, I would definitely have Jokic ahead of Wemby. And that was before even that game. I've already talked about why I've been a little bit lower on Wemby's case with the minutes being a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, I still think I would take him over both those guys. And then Coach of the Year and Sixth Man, I have Joe Mazzulla as Coach of the Year. And for me, that's partly because I was very low on Boston. I think if you look at their roster, like before Tatum returned, I just did not see it. I was like, I like Jaylen Brown, but I don't think he's capable of being a true number one. I like Derek White, but I think he's more of a number three, not a number two. And then I just see a bunch of like decent to solid role players, but not a supporting cast for a team that could win. I mean, they're 54-25. They might go 56-26. Like, I just did not see that. So, like Detroit, I did not see them as a one seed, but I did see them. I think I had them fifth in the East. I think I had my top five in the East. Or where did I have? So I had no, I might have had them fourth, I think, because I had Cleveland one, although I had New York as my finals pick, but I thought Cleveland would be the safest bet record-wise. I had New York two, and then I think I had, this did not age well, I think I had Orlando three and Detroit four. So I was like, I guess for me and my preseason expectations, I think both Detroit and Boston are overachieving. For me, Detroit's probably overachieving by 10 to 12 wins. Boston's overachieving for me by 18 to 22 wins. So I lean Mazzulla over JB, but I think JB's still the Vegas favorite. And I think it's pretty much down to those two. But I think JJ deserves a shout out in this. I think Jordan Ott deserves a shout out in this. And I think Mitch Johnson also deserves a shout out in this. Spurs just won 60 games. Detroit might not even get to 60 wins. So like most people had San Antonio as a 8 or 9 seed. And the fact that they're going to win 60 plus games, Mitch Johnson also deserves a shout. And then sixth man, I agree. Keldon Johnson for me is the sixth man of the year. I'm trying to think who else. Dennis Jenkins, I think, has made a late push for it, but I think it's a little bit too late. Overall, Isaiah Stewart, I also think is kind of an overlooked candidate in all this, but he also hasn't done himself any favors with the suspension. I would say Keldon Johnson to me has been the best six man. Keon Park, gonna go about we'll say till hour 45, so gonna go 10 more minutes. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. What other contending teams can give AR $40+ million contract? If only bottom teams, I don't see AR going title over cash. So bottom teams 40+, Lakers 30, AR will choose LA. No title teams can currently offer him. I think right now it's there's several like factors that can play into this, but I think generally the cap space teams, to again varying degrees depending on what happens, are Brooklyn, Chicago, Utah, Atlanta, and the Clippers. I guess Atlanta and the Clippers are two interesting ones. I think both are projected to only have in like the $30 million range, or maybe a little bit less, depending on what happens. Maybe Kawhi's contract gets voided, and all of a sudden the Clippers become a real threat to Austin. So to your point, I agree with your general premise, and I think Austin is going to stay. I just also think that I think 40 or let's just say 42, right? Or 41, 42 versus 30 is still a pretty big gap. And at that point, I also think that the Lakers are sensitive to the thought of Austin potentially leaving. And that's where Austin has some leverage here of, if Austin leaves, it's going to be really difficult to replace him. And like, there's not a like for like replacement in free agency, and there's not a like for like replacement on the trade market. So you're going to almost certainly be taking a step back from like that position and that archetype. So it's like, if Austin left, I know there's some fans that would be thrilled and would be over the moon and, you know, like that he's gone, but a lot of people would be upset, and it would feel that I would have to bring out the Karubot scale, and that would be, I think, a 4.5 or a 5 on the Karubot scale. So they can't get cute. Like, this is not the time to get cute. So I think he's getting at least 35, but I would say if I had to bet my life on it, I would go, if you told me it's going to be 30 or 42 or the max, I would bet the max. I'll be clear on that. I would be very shocked if he ends up only signing for 30. So make of that what you will. I could easily be wrong on this, but I put my life on the line. So we'll see how it plays out. Jay, thank you for the super chat. Is this roster realistic? And if so, is it a contender? Luka, AR, Watson, Braun, Mitchell Robinson, Eason, Smart, Kennard, DA, Hayes, Jake. Okay, let's quickly go through the money here. So Austin, let's just peg him at 35, although, again, it doesn't really matter. Watson, so with your cap space, you are signing Watson, Braun, Robinson, Eason, Smart, and Kennard. So you're going to split $55 million plus the exception for those 6 guys. I do not think that is realistic. I mean, Kennard might play his way into like a slightly bigger contract with the way that he's playing right now, but I was pegging him around like the $7 million range. So let's just say $7-8 million for Kennard. That's essentially the room exception. So I keep earmarking the room exception for Kennard. So let's put that to the side. Then you have, if we're being generous here, $55 million for Watson, Braun, Robinson, Eason, and Smart. I think Smart, I'll work around LeBron for a second, because the LeBron contract is just such a wild card that I don't think he's going to sign for the minimum. And I don't really think it makes a lot of sense from his end, but maybe it is 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, 25. I could see somewhere in that general range. But if we work backwards here, 55, I think Smart is going to get 10 to 12 million or so. That's low based on his on-court production, but based on the age, the injury history, I could see maybe him taking a discount to stay in LA, or just the market being a little cool on him. But I mean, if someone threw a 2 or 3 year non-taxpayer MLE deal at him, I would not be stunned. I mean, if you look, like, he's been objectively better than Dorian Finney-Smith, and we saw the contract that Dorian Finney-Smith played or earned this. Now, that contract has not aged well, but that's evaluating it in hindsight in terms of like, this guy comes to the Lakers, crushes it with plus minus, changes the defense, and Smart's been even more productive from a statistical perspective than DFS was. Smart, he's a little bit younger than DFS was when I think DFS was like a year older when comparing when they both entered free agency. So I think Smart, well, let's just split it and say like 12 million. All right, so you got 43 million left. Yeah, I mean, Watson's going to get 25 to 30 million. I think if it's 25, Denver's matching that for sure. I mean, I think Denver's matching it almost certainly, depending on Cam Johnson's played better. So maybe I think Christian Brown might end up being the guy that they try to get rid of, but we'll see how that plays out. But Watson, I don't see a world in which he gets under 25, and it might even be upwards of 30. So that right there would give you 13 million for Braun, Robinson, and Eason. I think Robinson's at least getting the non-taxpayer MLE, if not a little bit more. I think he's in that like $15 to $18 million range. And then Eason is playing his way into a smaller deal. But I still think with the shooting he has shown at times, I mean, he's been in like a multi-month long slump here, but he did shoot the ball much better earlier in the season. He has shot the ball better over stretches previously in his career. And just his makeup, his athleticism, his physicality, his toughness, multi-positional guy, someone will talk themselves into at least a non-taxpayer MLE with him. So yeah, I think and that's before we even mention what Braun is going to get, which like Braun could get 15 million or whatever. So I would say if you're getting Watson, Braun, Robinson, Eason, you are losing Smart, and you could probably keep Kennard, I guess, in that case. But even then, I think Watson's making 25, 30 of the 50, 55. If just between Watson and Braun, you might be at 45, and then you have 10 million max left over, which isn't enough for Robinson or Eason. So that's where it gets a little tricky. And maybe again, you let Smart walk, and then you could get one of Robinson or Eason. But I think basically one of Robinson or Eason is unrealistic here. If you did get this roster, though, somehow, let's just say Watson has a bad playoffs, he goes for less, or maybe LeBron takes the minimum. Is this roster a contender? I think so. I think this is a real upgrade on this year's group because you slot Smart more appropriately as a bench guy. Watson comes in, can do a lot of what Smart can do defensively, but is a better on-ball shot creator. I think would thrive in transition and as a cutter, also a better rebounder, and just gives you a certain amount of juice offensively in addition to adding a 6'8", 6'9" athletic wing defensively. Mitchell Robinson, different look than DA, but I think actually is would be a better lob threat next to Luka than DA is, and better rebounder, better defender, interior defender. So I think that's an upgrade. And then Eason, to me, is an upgrade over Rui. You still keep Smart, Kennard. You still have DA in a bench role, but he's no longer the starter. And then Hayes and Jake. And then it's before, like maybe you got rid of Vando and DK that helped you clear some additional money, but still, I think Robinson, Eason, and I don't even know if you could pull off Robinson, Eason, and Watson. That right there might just be like 60 to 65 million, which is those three before we even mention LeBron or Smart. So, but yeah, I think that would be a legit contender. Peter, thank you for the super chat. All the DNVR podcasts say that 0% chance Denver. Let's go. P-Watt, Braun, Cam. I've been better lately, but one has to go. Do you think LA could use one? Yes, I think LA could use either one. I've cooled on both of them in part for the reasons that Denver's more okay with. And this is what I've been trying to say when people have been throwing out the P-Watt stuff. I think they're going to keep him. I think it would be a dereliction of duty to let him walk. I think he's been their fourth best player this year behind Jokic, Murray, and Gordon. So, and by like a clear margin, I think he's been much better than Christian Brown and Cam Johnson for the entirety of the season. So losing P-Watt, like if you're locking in your starting group moving forward or for the next few years as like Murray, player X Watson, Gordon, Jokic, like I think that's a team that can win a championship, or like a starting group that can contend for a championship at least. Between the two, I think I would have said Christian Brown as recently as like a month ago, but he's not been shooting the ball well. That there's been like, he was actually close to Jake LaRavia on that list of guys, like worst wide open shooters. I think he might have been the second worst wide open shooter in the league. This year, just his shot has fallen off a cliff. Now it depends how much you believe in his shot, because as a rookie, shot 35% on threes, sophomore 38%, last year 40%, this year down at just under 31%. So history would suggest that he's just having a down year as a shooter, and that he will at least stabilize as a league average shooter, if not closer to that 38, 39%. He's younger than Cam Johnson. From a contract perspective, though, let's pull up their contracts here. Christian Brown has he's got 4 more years, 23.3, 25, 26.7, 28.5. Not a good contract, at least based on his performance this year. And then Cam Johnson, I believe, only has 1 more year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Cam Johnson, 21 this year, 23 next year. So my issue with Cam Johnson is that I've been advocating for, like, you kind of have to start him. I mean, you don't have to, but based on how much money he's making, it doesn't really make sense to, he would be theoretically the 3rd highest paid Laker, maybe the 4th, but it just like, you don't want to be having your 3rd or 4th highest paid player coming off the bench. It just doesn't really make sense from a roster construction perspective. So if you like, I guess to me, if LeBron is retiring or leaving, I think Cam Johnson can make some sense, because then you could slide Cam Johnson into the 4 spot and then go get a 3 who would be more of a defensive motor rebounding guy. If you don't do that, though, and it's like, I mean, now he's like kind of similar to Rui, right? Like, I think he's better than Rui, but it's similar limitations of, he's like an average-ish defender, but I think he leverages his length well, because he's like 6'9", 6'10". I think 6'9", and he's got a long wingspan. Like, I think he can be big out there, but he just isn't like, you know, the most athletic guy or the fleetest of foot. So I'd say to me, he's more like an average-ish to like slightly below average defender. The shooting is good, but I think you need a better rebounder and defender at that spot, especially if it's surrounding Luka, Austin, and LeBron. So I would say, if you know LeBron's gone, whether he's retiring or leaving, Cam Johnson, to me, could make some sense. If it's like the status quo, then I think Christian Brown could be like a sneaky, you know, could he just need a change of scenery and like play better here? But there's a lot of risk, because that 4 more years left on that contract, ascending up until almost $30 million for a guy who is having like arguably the worst season of his career, or definitely a worse season than the last couple. Like, you don't want a guy to be like descending this early in their career, right? So, all right, see, I hit went a little bit over, so I'm going to answer this final one, and then I will get out of here. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. By just bringing our guys back, AR 20 on the book, Braun 20, Smart 10, Hayes 5, 55 is gone. We lose Rui and Luke. How are we realistically going to get 3 and Ds via trade? Or AR 20 isn't in the 55, so we can get $120 million 3 and wing. Is that enough? So I've talked this through before, but I'll do a quick recap here in terms of still, when I go to Spot Track, it always opens up Andrew Wiggins. So the Lakers have, for next season, they're going to have, I believe, 7 guys Yeah, they're going to have 7 guys under contract for sure. So it's going to be Luka, Vando, Jake, Dalton, and a Deuce. So like technically 5 guys, but then Bronny and Kobe Buffkin are Kobe's got a team option. Bronny's got a partial guarantee. 1.2 of his 2.3 is guaranteed. So let's just roughly say 7. And then DA and Marcus both have player options. DA 8.1, I think he's going to opt in. So that would give you 8 guys. Marcus 5.4, I think he's going to opt out and get at least double that. So that keeps you at 8. Then the Lakers will, because they got bird rights on them and their cap hold is low enough, they will keep Jackson Hayes and Austin Reeves on their cap holds and then only go into re-signing those guys once they've made their moves. So if you give them those 10 guys of, Luka, Austin on a cap hold, Vando, DA opting in, Jake, Dalton, Kobe, Bronny, and Adu, plus Jackson on a cap hold, that gives you 10 guys. And that gives you roughly, I think it's somewhere around 48 or so million, or maybe it's 52 million, but then that's not including the 2026 pick. So if you add in the 2026 pick, maybe that gets you down to like 48 million, right? So you got 11 players, 4 empty roster spots, and 48 million or so in cap space. Now you could clear some more cap space in a variety of ways. Maybe DA doesn't opt in. That gets you an extra 8 million. Now that jumps up from 48 to 56. Or you could decline the team option on Kobe Buffkin and waive Bronny with his partial. So if you lose Kobe Buffkin and Bronny, that saves about $3.5 or $3.7 million, almost $4 million. So now you get from 48 to about 52. And then you could also try to dump Dalton. You could try to dump Vando. You'll probably have to attach, not even probably, you will have to attach an asset, specifically a first round pick to do that. But if you could somehow dump Dalton and Vando are making a combined 16.6 million. So if you dump that as well, now that could balloon from like 52 to 68. I think that's unlikely, but just talking through some scenarios here. So the Austin on the 20, his cap hold is 20.9. So Austin would be on the books, but as a $20.9 million contract. So what happens is with the cap space, you are allowed to make your moves, fill out your roster, and then go back, sign Austin to a new contract. And because you have his bird rights, you're able to go further above the cap. So that's how that would play out with Austin. And then he'd get whatever contract he's going to get this summer. So there's, again, like a variety of ways this could play out, and it depends on DA and his market. It depends how they assess and evaluate Kobe Buffkin and Bronny. It depends on, does anybody talk themselves into Dalton? Will anybody take on Vando plus a first? Is that enough? Is there someone willing to be a dumping ground? Brooklyn, Chicago, whatever. So there's a lot of moving parts in terms of how the Lakers can create cap space. And so generally, like, I think in a more realistic case, let's say 48, 50 million, especially if you waive, like, I think Kobe Buffkin right now, I'd be kind of surprised if they picked up that team option. So we'll just say 50 million as like a floor. And then you could make upwards of like 70 million, but that's probably going to cost you dumping someone with a pick or something. So for argument's sake, let's just say 50 to 55, which is what I continue to say. You can get that 3-and-D guy, whether it's Peyton Watson's almost like graduating out of that class, but he's sort of fits it. Tari Eason kind of fits it. Lou Dort could fit that if OKC either trades him or declines his team option and he becomes a free agent. Jalen Suggs is more of a 3-and-D guard than a 3-and-D wing, but if Orlando loses in round 1, which they look like they're probably going to do, Orlando could be like, we're just too expensive and we need to get off some money here. And I think Paolo and Franz are too good. Desmond Bane, maybe you could get Desmond Bane, but like that's a lot of money to take on. Jalen Suggs, a little bit lower contract, and like I think he'd fit really well next to Austin and Luka. So there's different ways they can go about it. There's also some cheaper guys that we talked about it a couple shows ago, went through some of the bargain bin free agent guys. And we'll certainly be doing a lot of free agent content whenever the season ends, right? Like that's basically all we're going to do is talk draft and free agency. But so Austin is part of the money that is on the books already that is allowing for the 55 in space. If you got rid of Austin, then that would stretch that out even more. But if you look at the free agent class and like who might be, I mean, I like a lot of the guys I just named, but they're not, none of those guys are as good as Austin, and none of those guys fit like the specific role that Austin has. So that's a general cap overview. And then final one here from Laner. Thank you for the super chat. Is LeBron likely leaving? Love your thoughts, Jovan. I appreciate that. And I think it shifted back toward LeBron more likely staying. I think that this stretch that the Lakers just had proved a certain floor and ceiling for the group. And also, I think like just looking at how much fun LeBron has been having and the fact that, I mean, the way that he was playing and, you know, has been playing, and the embracing of taking a bit of a step back to empower Luka and Austin and just his spot in the hierarchy. Like, we've just never seen LeBron be even really a number 2 option. If you go through his entire career, like he's always been the number 1, even when he was kind of the number 2 to AD for parts, like he was still more the number 1. So really, I mean, there's a shift post Luka trade and then, you know, bigger shift this year, but I think he's really enjoyed this, like the second half of this season. And I think he is more likely to stay than leave among but you also have to factor in the potential of retirement. And I think that's seems to be unlikely, but it's not completely off the table. So yeah, I also think if you look at the market, like, I mean, he just had the comments about not liking going back to Cleveland. That does not seem to be something you would say if you want to go back to Cleveland. And then I guess there's like Golden State in New York, but I've noted he's talked out against James Dolan before. And I guess Golden State maybe looms as like the biggest threat, but they're pretty limited in terms of what they could offer him. So I think if he plays another year, I think right now the most likely scenario is him staying in LA. And then Keon Park follows up here. Thank you for the super chat. Do we not need those top 25 to 30 million, not 1, but 2 and 3, 2 to 3 3-and-Ds? Can we get that if we bring AR and Braun? Are there ways around it? I'm a little confused with this. I mean, what I would say is, you're saying like not the top 3-and-D guys. Could you find a way to get like 2 or 3? Like, yeah, I mean, you could distribute it a variety of ways. It depends what the options are, right? Like if Peyton Watson just stays put in Denver and Tari Eason stays put in Houston, or maybe someone throws a bag at him that, like Chicago is like, hey, Tari Eason, here's $25 million after, you know, the struggles he's had, then those guys are off the board. And then if Lou Dort maybe gets traded somewhere else, or, like OKC's like, we really don't want to send Lou Dort to the Lakers or set it up for him to end up in LA. Let's trade him to Brooklyn. Let's trade him to Chicago, whatever. Yeah, then they have to pivot and find different options. So I would prefer the more expensive guys, because at least one expensive guy, I would like one stud 3-and-D wing, and then you can find like a cheaper guy or 2. But I would actually prioritize quality over quantity, because I think it really matters with like the starting lineup and the closing lineup. And then Laner follows up, is Braun retiring next year or in LA 2 more years? I would say 1 more year in LA. But I'm going to wrap here. Appreciate you all. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Keon Park guys, is that the 55 is enough? The 55 is enough to sign one guy. I don't know if you could get 2 guys, but we'll see. But appreciate you all. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Thank you for tuning in after a brutal loss from a results perspective, but in reality, like based on who is out, I think it actually went better than expected. It went better than last week. So guys didn't get injured. Lakers didn't lose by 40. Now you got to look at some of the bright spots here. But I will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. With Lakers Collective. And then I will also be on Spectrum tomorrow. I'm doing both the podcast and the show. So podcast will be coming out, I believe, sometime afternoon, early evening. Show will be coming out at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So be on the lookout for all that tomorrow. Not going live, I don't think, tomorrow unless something crazy happens, but we'll be back then. Actually, so programming note, I'm going to be off Thursday, spending the night with my son and just taking one final breather before the playoffs start. So I'll be, I guess, technically be back Friday. Maybe I can go live at some point Thursday in the morning, but we'll see. As of right now, I'm going to be off Thursday. But I appreciate you all. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Got the merch. I just ordered a bunch of t-shirts, final round to test out, and then we'll be going live. Appreciate you all and talk to you all tomorrow.